Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spin It Reviews, and today I'm going to be talking about my time at Warped Tour 2014. So the band's Warped Tour is something that I've really only been interested in the last couple of years, this being my second time going. Both because, well, 5-year-old me wouldn't be that into Warped in 2002, and because I've just heard over the years so much that's just been this punchline of a festival. Turning from a once great punk tour into this gathering of scene bands getting together for the fangirls, which even now I can admit it is to a very small extent. But then, just when I was starting to get into these subgenres like metalcore and the newer kind of pop-punk, and making friends that were into these styles, I figured I'd take a look at the Warped 2013 lineup to sort of get my own perspective on things. And despite, admittedly, some bad headliners, I really enjoyed it, so I ended up going and I had a great time. I got into a lot of bands and artists I wouldn't have otherwise gotten into, including Red Gold Green, whose album was one of my favorites of last year, and it was my first time going to a festival quite like this, where there's stages everywhere, and you need to decide who to see at any given time. For me, it was a very exciting thing. It was just a really fun experience, and if you want to know a little more information about my time there, including pictures and recaps of who I saw, I made a photo album of this around the same time on the Spin It Reviews Facebook page, back when it was called That Not Elite's Music Fan and I was doing text reviews, which I'll link in the description if you're curious. So needless to say, I was pretty excited about this year's lineup, and over the last few months, like last year, I sampled pretty much all the bands and artists playing the Chula Vista show here in San Diego, and deciding who and who not to see. And now the rest of this video is going to be in voiceover over pictures, and I'll link in the description a couple songs from each of the bands and artists to talk about. Let's do this. This is the little guide I carried around with me to remind me who and who not to see. As you might have guessed, Green is good, and a definite priority. Default Black is meh, just nothing terrible, but nothing that really stands out either, or they just have mixed opinions on from song to song. And Red is bad, which really doesn't need much explanation. If you're curious about my thoughts on anyone here that I don't talk about later in the video, feel free to ask in the comments. And know that if it's someone I marked as red that you're a fan of, I won't have any kind of at least pretensions about it, just like how I hope you won't hit me with a bunch of fanboy or fangirl rage. Also keep in mind that I'm not too familiar with a lot of this lineup, despite hearing about them a lot and sampling them during this lineup thing, and a good majority of cases only know the most popular songs, so just assume that with anyone here unless I see otherwise. Okay, moving on to the day itself. I got there at around 10:45 and spent basically the next half hour planning out my schedule, even setting alarms on my phone for a couple minutes before each act I planned to see started. It sounds like a bit too much, I know, but trust me, it was worth it. I definitely wanted to see a hip-hop or electronic artist at Warped like I did last year with Mac Lethal, since to me the diversity is one of the best things about Warped nowadays, and luckily early in the day, with pretty much no other acts I was interested in, was K.Flay, who to me is one of the better rappers on the lineup. She's got a nice laid-back flow, some really thoughtful and personal lyrics over spacious, reverby beats, and she incorporates a lot of singing in a way that really works. But on the other side of things, if you just want to hear some great spitting, check out Hail Mary, her collab track with the one and only Danny Brown. It all translated live pretty well too, thanks in part to the use of a live drummer. Her debut full-length also came out this week, so hopefully I'll give that a listen at some point. Next up was This Wild Life, who I'm honestly surprised didn't play the acoustic basement. They're a duo consisting of a singer-songwriter/guitarist and lead guitarist that plays a fairly distinct brand of pretty sentimental pop folk. Although I was surprised to not hear their popular and really good cover of Bring Me the Horizon's Sleepwalking during their set, since for a Warped Tour audience that'd be a real good opportunity. After that I saw 4 Years Strong. Now it's always nice and refreshing when a modern pop-punk band manages to stand out in some way, shape, or form, pun intended. And between the rougher vocals and actually daring to have a memorable melody once in a while, they managed to do just that. They've apparently been away for a couple of years and are releasing what's basically their comeback EP, Go Down in History, next month. And if the single Tread Lightly, which is actually my favorite song from them currently, is any indication, it should be a great one. Also, from what I've heard from her last album, Stuck in the Middle and Just Drive, I don't really get the hate for it. Sure, they're not quite as rough or distinct as the other stuff, but they're still pretty well-written rock songs. Maybe 4 Years Strong fans just hate the Foo Fighters, I don't know. But yeah, great lively set from them. From there I saw Bad Rabbits, a band you'd probably expect on Soul Train before Warped Tour. I don't think I've heard such a good mix of funk, soul, R&B, and hard rock that works this naturally since the first few Lenny Kravitz albums. It also really shows in their stage presence, which went all out with choreographed dances, rockstar wails, and even a sensual slow jam. It was one of those shows that's so fun that you're perfectly willing to go with the audience participation parts, during which the singer would shout, "Don't be too cool." A mindset that I am admittedly sometimes guilty of having during shows. One of my few regrets about last year is that I unfortunately never got around to seeing a show at the Acoustic Basement, so I made it a priority to see at least one there this time around, and who better than the founder of the stage, Brian Marquis. I remember liking what I'd heard from him last year, and now he's got a new album, and from what I'm hearing, even better songs, which of course is probably the most important thing at a solo acoustic set. From there I saw I Fight Dragons. Now, I've known about this band vaguely for a couple years now because the instrumental version of one of their songs is used in a lot of SourceFed videos. And upon listening to more of them, I was an instant fan. Basically take the infectious, distorted power pop hooks and subtle nerdiness of Weezer, the silliness and charm Bowling for Soup, and the chiptune synths and not-so-subtle nerdiness of On Monoguchi, sprinkle a little sci-fi aesthetic, and you pretty much have I Fight Dragons. I really can't wait for their sophomore album to drop this September. Then after catching pretty much one song from the Maine, I saw Air Dubai. Now, when I was going through the Warped lineup in alphabetical order, this band was an early favorite for sure. The first comparison came to mind to me was Red Gold Green from last year, in terms of rap-based rock bands of the last couple years. But these guys have a much different approach to it, bringing in more synths and electronics, and even having both a singer and a rapper. I actually got their album after their set, and definitely plan on covering it in the near future on this channel, so stay tuned for that. And now I transition from one of the newer sounding and more eclectic bands here to Teenage Bottlerocket, who were definitely carrying the flag this year for the old school punk rock that most of Warped's early years consisted of. That being said, I don't really think I'm going to look too much into this band in the future, just because I feel it's a throwback sound I can get kind of bored by after a while. Still, it was nice to have a blast of energy like that day. Then after seeing Anberlin and Lionize, who were both really good, in line for the Air Dubai meet and greet, I saw Icon for Hire. Now I really regret not getting around to their album from last year, since they're easily one of the more distinct bands on the lineup, at least as of now. Picture this: poppy alternative metal with electronics, occasionally rapped vocals, and bitingly self-aware lyrics about the music industry and themselves as a band. I know, it sounds crazy, but it all works together really well. I'm always a sucker for an artist that can avoid the typical subject matter of their genre, and Icon for Hire does just that. Also, they covered Macklemore, which is pretty cool. So now's when my day hit a bit of a brief low point. I just missed the second Acoustic Basement show I planned to see that day, so I figured I'd go get a late lunch. And just next to the vendor, of course, was Chunk No Captain Chunk. Oh, I'm sorry. Chunk No Captain Chunk! This is one of those bands where a good amount of my friends whose musical opinions I value are fans of this band, and I have absolutely no idea why. Like I said earlier, there are bands that can pull off this whole genre fusion thing well, and this isn't one of them. The pop-punk vocals and metalcore growls and breakdowns just clash so badly, and it's just awkward to me. I mean, their all-star cover isn't bad, and I sang the crap out of "Hey dudes, are you ready to?" when the song came up, but they just don't do it for me, really. But that wasn't the worst thing I heard that day. That would be right after, when I left the area, heard Falling in Reverse in the background. and decided to stick with the lesser of two evils. Luckily, though, after Radke left, Less Than Jake went on and made everything okay again. They're basically filling this year's third wave ska veteran quota, as done last year by Real Big Fish and Goldfinger, and did a pretty good job at it, which might be partially because they've apparently played Warped more than any other band. I'll admit that I haven't heard much from them beyond the hits like The Science of Selling Yourself Short and All My Best Friends Are Metalheads, but I've still really enjoyed it all and really want to look more into them in the future. Also, I've noticed that for a third wave ska band, they can write some pretty smart and even introspective lyrics. The only nitpick is that I'm a little disappointed they didn't play one of their new singles, My Money Is on the Long Shot, which was pretty heavily promoted in their Warped promo stuff. From there I saw Courage My Love, a pretty solid pop-punk and alt-metal trio, followed by the Protomen. Like the Aquabats from last year, I imagine anyone watching these guys without prior knowledge left very, very confused. I said earlier that I Fight Dragons' nerdiness isn't exactly subtle, but the Protomen even managed to top that. If I Fight Dragons is Weezer meets Anamanaguchi, then the Protomen are Queen meets Comic-Con. Visually, they're very flashy, over-the-top, and a touch gimmicky, but in a way that's fun to go along with. The music fits that pretty well, mostly going into synthy arena rock with some kind of running epic storyline going along with it. Luckily, I got a little crash course in them from a friend who's a big fan, so I went in at least kind of knowing what to expect. Plus, they covered Iron Maiden, which is always a plus in my book. Next up was Bayside. I actually listened to their new album Colt as my full-length introduction to them a few days before Warped, since it's been getting a lot of acclaim and I really like the singles. I won't be able to review it because of time, so I'll just talk about it a bit here. In a nutshell, it's fantastic, and it's definitely going to be one of my favorites of the year. Like I said with 4 Years Strong, I found it hard to find modern pop-punk bands that stand out, and between the hard-hitting riffs, the infectious melodies and choruses, the biting lyrics chock full of personality, and actually daring to have some dynamics in their songwriting and instrumentation, this band might be one of my new favorites for that. If I had to compare, they kind of remind me of an angstier Jimmy Eat World, since they do have that alt-rock side and poppy hooks to, again, make them a bit more distinct. I have a hard time nailing down my favorite tracks, but maybe my favorite lyrically, and thankfully one they did at their show, is Stuttering. If you want me to elaborate a bit, let me know in the comments, but yeah, great set from them, even though I didn't immediately recognize every song they did from their early years. I wanted to see at least one metalcore band this year, since I saw two really good ones last year in Stick to Your Guns and Oh Sleeper. There are some I liked that I found about this year, like The Word Alive, I The Breather, and Straight from the Path, but the one I ended up seeing was Ice Nine Kills. I remember marking them as good last year, but frankly after seeing them I kind of forgot why. They just sounded and acted really generic, like I was seeing that every metalcore vocalist video in real life. Oh well, at least just something to check off the list. Anyway, next up I saw One OK Rock, a Japanese band who were actually pretty enjoyable, despite a lot of their lyrics admittedly sounding basically like hard rock versions of that Let's Fighting Love song from South Park. I mean, I guess Japanese do tend to have a higher threshold for cheesiness, so I'll forgive that. And before you call me out for stereotyping, just remember that this band named themselves after their own mispronunciation of 1 o'clock. Next up was Neck Deep. Now, if you've seen my review of their album Wishful Thinking, which I'll link here and in the description, you know that I was kinda mixed on it. These guys definitely have talent and can write some great songs, but to me they just spend too much time resting on modern pop-punk cliches. Despite that, though, they're really good live, putting in a lot of energy and passion, even when the songs themselves tend to run together. My only letdown personally is that they only did 2 songs from Wishful Thinking. 3 if you count What Do You Expect, which I don't, since the singer introduces the song from Rain in July, the EP that 5 out of 8 songs on Cells consisted of for some reason, leaving out some of their best standouts like The Zoltar Speaks and even the big single Growing Pains. Still, again, they're great live, and definitely not the most overrated and unmemorable pop-punk band out there. Real friends, story so far. Sorry, got some pizza stuck in my back of my throat. After that was Beebs and her Moneymakers, and, you know, there are some bands where you just don't know why you like them as much as you do, and for an amateur critic and reviewer like myself, that's a hard thing. Maybe it's because of the fact that they're pretty much the only new band I see bringing back that old third-wave ska spirit and sound, albeit with even more goofiness, and getting somewhat successful with it. Or maybe it's just catchy songs, I don't know. But either way, they're just a fun band to see live, as long as you have a high enough threshold for corniness in the form of matching wardrobes and Bill Cosby impressions. So, before I continue, let me just ask you guys this. What would you say is the toughest part of Warped?
No, it's not the heat, or the fangirls, or the mixed quality on the lineup, or not hearing your favorite song from one of your favorite bands on the lineup. No, that would be schedule conflicts. Now, fortunately, I was able to sort out pretty much all of these at the beginning of the day, but easily the one that stood out the most to me was Yellowcard versus Mixtapes. Now, for most people, this would be a no-brainer in favor of Yellowcard. I mean, they're pretty much elder statesmen of pop-punk at this point, so how could I possibly pass up the opportunity to see them? Well, here's the thing. Mixtapes is a band I first discovered about a week before Warped, and at the end of the day, I might have heard a lot more stuff from Yellowcard and liked a good amount of it, for sure, pretty much all of it, in fact, but 2 out of the 4 or 5 songs I've heard from Mixtapes, I'd probably put in my top 10 or maybe even top 5 pop-punk songs of the last 5 years. So I ended up going with them, and I don't regret it one bit, since they were easily one of the best of the day. This band really manages to pull off the best of both worlds when it comes to pop-punk, really pulling off that wordy or introspective edge of the modern stuff, while still, and this might be crazy, but bear with me, having hooks! I know, right? Who'd have thunk it? The idea that pop-punk could be poppy, instead of just being this really, really wimpy version of punk rock I hear constantly crapped out by the... Sorry, I got carried away there. But yeah, these guys really managed to stand out, and the male-female co-lead vocals really help with that too. Plus, they definitely got one of the more entertaining bands on the lineup live, injecting their set between songs with a lot of sarcastic humor and audience banter. The biggest standout moment to me was when the male singer and guitarist was joking before a song that, if you don't mosh to this, you're a poser, and you'll get kicked out of Warped, and be forced to buy and wear an Attila shirt. Personally, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Also, they took requests from fans for most of the set, which was pretty cool. Now, as you can tell, this is a pretty tough act to follow, let alone match or top, but just as I'd hoped and expected, Bowling for Soup killed it. Granted, it would have been pretty obvious if you've heard any of their music that they wouldn't exactly take things too seriously, but they just went off between and even during songs on these little comedic bits that just had the whole crowd going crazy, myself included. But at the same time, it wasn't forced, like they broke into a full-on stand-up set or something. More like these funny little observations and little tales and stuff, like the circle pit that looks more like an amoeba, or going down the list of stuff they did in their day off in San Diego, or noticing how well the crowd reacts to being insulted in just the right way, stuff like that. One standout moment for me, for sure, was when the band left their instruments and posed at both sides of the stage in what they called the phone photo opportunity. And of course, because I'm part of the problem, I ended up taking a picture of that. Plus, they did the Phineas and Ferb theme song, which was pretty cool, and also, just to make you all feel old, was the first thing I ever heard from them at age 11. But my only real disappointment was that aside from that, their set was really predictable. And I get it, they commercially peaked in the mid-2000s and had all their hits from 2002 to 2006. But out of the 4 albums I've heard from them, their new one from last year, Lunch Drunk Love, the review which I'll link in the description, is probably my favorite. So I was a little let down to not hear anything from that, especially Critically Disdained, which would have been a great opener. Still, I'm not sure if they were my favorite of the day, but they were definitely the most entertaining. And now I'm just going to go over the last 2 I was really looking forward to and enjoyed. We Are the In Crowd and Echosmith. Both being really good female-fronted pop rock bands I've heard a lot about and really liked the singles from, but never really listened to a full album from. Though I might give We Are the In Crowd's Weird Kids listen reviewed in the near future, but that's kind of up in the air. Anyway, We Are the In Crowd are more on the pop-punk side of things, whereas Echosmith's more in the vein of indie pop or even just straight-up pop music, but in a good way. I also bunched them together, kind of, because recently both bands' respective frontwomen, Tay Jardine and Sydney Sierra, were interviewed together in an article on Fuse, I'll link in the description, on being female musicians on Warped Tour. That was pretty interesting, even if the interviewer did seem to ask a lot of leading questions, to act like there was more blatant sexism in the industry than there really is. But yeah, both bands were great, and it was a great end to a great day at Warped. Except that right after, out of morbid curiosity, I figured I'd see Get Scared since they were pretty much the only band left. I don't get it. Their music is pretty much just a less interesting version of Black Veil Brides, if that's even possible, meets generic breakdown core, and the frontman just came off really cocky on stage. So after about one song I left, got handed and promptly threw away a preachy pamphlet about veganism, and I called it a day. So yeah, another great day at Warped Tour. Now I know I'm kind of late to the party on this whole thing, but I just can't wait to go for this for a third time next year. It's really a shame that it has the reputation it has, since there were easily enough great acts to fill a day, maybe even two. Remember that I have songs from each act I saw in the description, along with set lists. If not from the Chula Vista show, then some other one on Warped that's hopefully along the same lines. And sorry this took so long, but I kinda got mic troubles about halfway through making this video, as you can probably tell around the neck deep point. And if any of you guys have been to Warped Tour this year, want to go this year, or been to it past year, just really have anything to say about this, any association, feel free to talk about it in the comments down below. I'm happy to have a discussion. And share this around with anyone who might be interested. Like the Facebook page in the description for updates, commentaries, music news, and reviews of older albums. And hopefully I'll see you on the next episode of Spin It Reviews.